at my son's $500,000 wedding on our family estate. Beneath crystal chandeliers I'd worked 30 years to afford, my daughter-in-law looked straight at my wife and screamed a word that shattered glass-quiet elegance into raw chaos. She called her a saboteur, and before the echo faded, she had security guards, men I'd hired, men I was paying, grip my wife by both arms and march her past 300 guests toward the exit. My wife, who chose every rosebush in that garden. My wife, who wore a cream-colored dress the bride herself had requested. My son stood 10 feet away, champagne in hand, and looked at the floor. And in that moment, I realized this reception wasn't about love or family. If you're watching this, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. And now, so you can understand how a single envelope could dismantle an empire built on lies, I need to take you back to the very first moment. The moment my wife, Maria, stepped through those French doors in a dress that would become a weapon. I stood frozen for exactly 4 seconds after security touched her shoulders. Not because I didn't understand what was happening, but because I needed to be absolutely certain of what I was seeing. On the stone terrace of the Mon estate, the evening breeze carried the scent of lake water and gardenias. String lights wrapped around century-old oak trees cast a golden glow that belonged in a fairy tale, not a nightmare. The wedding had been flowing like champagne from the fountain until everything collapsed in the span of 3 minutes. My wife, Maria, had been standing near the gift table, her silk cream dress catching the warm light, making her look softer than usual. She didn't want to be noticed. I knew that about her. After 38 years of marriage, I could read the way she held her pearl necklace between her fingers when she was nervous. She had chosen that dress with Christine's approval. Christine's explicit approval, 3 months earlier during a shopping trip where the bride had smiled and said, "That's perfect, Mom. Elegant. Classic. Not white at all." But tonight, with 300 guests watching and a 4-piece orchestra playing Vivaldi, Christine's memory had apparently shifted. Maria had been examining the cake, a 6-tier architectural marvel that cost more than most people's cars, when Christine appeared beside her. There was no build-up. No warning. Christine's hand shot out and grabbed Maria's wrist, her perfectly manicured nails pressing into skin that would bruise by morning. "What do you think you're doing?" The bride's voice cut through conversation like a blade. Maria turned, confused. You wore white to my wedding." Christine's voice rose with each word, designed for maximum audience impact. "You're trying to upstage me. On MY Day." I saw Maria's face drain of color. The dress was cream. Unmistakably, obviously cream. The color of aged parchment, of candlelight on linen. But in the glow of the string lights and the rage of a bride who needed a villain, Christine made it sound like an unforgivable sin. "Christine, sweetheart, this is the dress you helped me pick." Maria's voice was steady, but I could hear the tremor underneath. "I would never." Christine looked around at the watching guests, playing to the crowd now. "Security! Security!" That's when the 2 men in black suits appeared. Men I'd hired through the wedding planner. Men whose paychecks I would sign. They approached Maria with the apologetic efficiency of people just doing their job, and Christine pointed toward the exit like a queen banishing a traitor. "Get her out of here. She's ruining everything." I waited for Jackson. God help me. I waited for my son to step between his mother and those guards. One sentence would have been enough. One hand raised in protest. But Jackson stood beside his bride, his expression carefully blank, like a man watching something happen to someone he'd never met. Then he said it. Not loud, not angry, just factual. "Mom, you should probably just go. This is Christine's moment. Don't make it worse. Don't make it worse." As if his mother, the woman who'd packed his lunches through law school, who'd sat through every graduation, every disappointment, every triumph, was the problem. As if the guards gripping her arms and the 300 guests staring in horror were somehow her fault for wearing the wrong shade of off-white. I watched Maria's shoulders hunch forward as she was escorted toward the garden path. She didn't cry. She didn't shout. She just left. like a guest who'd overstayed her welcome at her own family's estate. The orchestra started playing again, try to smooth over the moment. Guests returned to their conversations with forced brightness. Christine adjusted her veil and smiled at well-wishers as if nothing had happened. That's when I felt it. Not anger. Not yet. Something colder. Clearer. I reached into my inner jacket pocket and felt the envelope I'd had my attorney prepare 2 days earlier. Just insurance, he'd called it. Just in case your suspicions are correct, David. My suspicions about Jeffrey Fuchs and his mounting debts. About the moving van I'd seen at the guest house last week. About the mortgage application I'd found in my own study trash can. About the phone call I'd overheard where Christine's father promised someone, "The house will be ours by midnight." The old man already verbally agreed. I looked at my son, who was now slow dancing with his bride, both of them pretending the last 5 minutes hadn't happened. Then I looked at the DJ booth. It was time to stop the music. Maria had started getting ready at 3 in the afternoon. I remember because I walked past our bedroom and saw her sitting at her vanity, the cream dress hanging on the closet door like a ghost of elegance. She'd been staring at it for a full minute, her hand hovering over the fabric as if testing its temperature. "You're sure about this one?" I'd asked, leaning against the doorframe. She'd smiled. That small, private smile she reserved for moments when she was trying to convince herself of something. Christine picked out with me, remember? She said it was perfect, classic, mother of the groom, appropriate. Maria had turned to look at me then, and I saw the worry lines creasing her forehead. "It's not too much, is it? Not too plain." I'd crossed the room and kissed her temple. "You could wear a paper bag and outshine everyone there." She'd laughed, but the tension hadn't left her shoulders. Now, watching her walk through the French doors of our estate's grand ballroom, I understood why she'd been so nervous. Maria had an instinct for danger that I'd always dismissed as overthinking. Turned out, she'd been right to worry. The dress fit her perfectly, tea-length silk that caught the light without demanding it, a soft cream that reminded me of aged champagne or old photographs. She wore the pearls I'd given her for our 20th anniversary and carried a small clutch that matched her shoes. Everything about her appearance whispered refinement, the kind of understated elegance that came from confidence rather than competition. Christine saw her immediately. I watched the bride's eyes lock onto Maria from across the room, watched her expression shift from practiced joy to something sharp and calculating. Christine was standing near the chocolate fountain, surrounded by bridesmaids in blush pink, and when she spotted my wife, her laugh cut off mid-note. Maria didn't notice. She was too busy taking in the transformation of our home. The estate we'd built from nothing, now draped in ivory and gold, filled with flowers that cost more than some people's monthly rent. She looked proud. This was her home too, her garden, her legacy. She'd earned the right to walk through those doors with her head high. But Christine was already moving, cutting through the crowd with the determined grace of a shark that's caught a scent. Her wedding dress, a cascading masterpiece of French lace and Austrian crystals that had required its own insurance policy, seemed to amplify her presence. Guests parted automatically. The photographer's flash captured her from every angle. I was halfway across the room, intending to greet some business associates, when I heard Christine's voice rise above the string quartet. "Oh my God. Oh my God." The music didn't stop, but conversations did. That's the thing about a certain tone of voice. It demands attention even when it shouldn't. Christine had perfected it. That particular pitch that suggested scandal, that promised drama worth witnessing. Maria turned, still smiling, still unaware. "Christine, darling, you look absolutely. What are you wearing?" The question hung in the air like an accusation. I stopped walking. Around me, I felt rather than saw the shift in the room's energy. Phones came out. People turned. The bridesmaids formed a semicircle behind Christine, a pink wall of silent support. Maria looked down at her dress, then back up, confusion flickering across her face. It's the dress we picked together, sweetheart. The one from Nordstrom, remember? I said cream. That is not cream. Christine's voice climbed another octave. She gestured wildly at Maria's dress, her diamond bracelet catching the light. That is white. You wore white to my wedding. I could see Maria's mind working, trying to process the accusation. The dress was cream. Objectively, undeniably cream. In the natural light, streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows, it looked even more distinctly separate from white. Warm where white would be cool, soft where white would be stark. Christine, I promise you, this is the exact dress you approved. Maria's voice was steady but quiet, the voice of someone trying to de-escalate a situation she didn't understand. Are you calling me a liar? Christine turned to the gathering crowd, playing to them now. Did everyone see this? She wore white to my wedding. White. The one thing every woman knows you don't do. A bridesmaid, I think it was Christine's college roommate, leaned in and whispered something that made Christine's eyes flash with vindicated rage. Another pulled out her phone, angling for the perfect shot of the drama. This wasn't spontaneous outrage. This was orchestrated humiliation. Maria took a step back, her hand instinctively moving to her pearls. I knew that gesture. She did it when she was fighting tears, when she was trying to hold herself together in public. I started moving toward her, but the crowd had thickened. Everyone wanted to see what would happen next. I would never approve white, Christine continued, her voice now carrying to every corner of the ballroom. I specifically told you, I specifically said, cream means something darker, something that doesn't compete with the bride. She turned to her maid of honor. Madison, you were there. Tell her. Madison nodded with the enthusiasm of someone who'd been given a speaking role in a play. You definitely said darker cream. Like cappuccino cream. It was a lie. I knew it was a lie because I'd seen the dress Christine had sent Maria pictures of, the exact dress Maria was wearing now, with Christine's text underneath. This one. Perfect. Can't wait to see you in it. But Maria didn't have her phone. She didn't have screenshots. She only had the truth, and in a room full of people primed for spectacle, the truth was negotiable. Christine, please, I don't understand. Maria's voice cracked slightly, and I felt something cold settle into my chest. Security! Christine's shout was sudden, decisive. Someone get security? I want her removed. That's when I saw Jackson, my son, standing 15 feet away with a champagne flute in his hand and an expression of practiced neutrality on his face. He was watching his mother being publicly eviscerated, and his face showed nothing. No soap, no defense, nothing. The security guards appeared with the efficiency of people who'd been briefed on their role. 2 men in dark suits, the same men I'd approved hiring through the wedding planner, the same men whose pay would come from my accounts. They approached Maria with apologetic faces but firm hands. Ma'am, we're going to have to ask you to leave. Maria looked at them, then at Christine, then finally at Jackson. I saw her mouth form his name. Jackson, our son, took a sip of his champagne. He looked at his shoes, at the ceiling, at his bride, anywhere but at his mother. When he finally spoke, his voice was flat, businesslike. Mom, just go. You're making this harder than it needs to be. It's Christine's day. Don't ruin it. Don't ruin it. As if she'd planned this. As if she'd worn the wrong dress on purpose. As if the guards now, taking her by the elbows, were somehow her fault. I watched my wife's spine straighten in that way it does when she's decided to preserve her dignity at any cost. She didn't shake off the guards. She didn't make a scene. She simply said, I understand, in a voice so quiet I almost didn't hear it, and let them lead her toward the garden exit. The walk seemed to take forever. 300 guests watched in silence, broken only by the clicking of phone cameras and the whispered commentary that would become social media posts within the hour. Maria kept her head up, but I could see her hands trembling. The pearl necklace caught the light one last time as she reached the French doors. Jackson drained his champagne and accepted a fresh glass from a passing waiter. Christine smoothed her dress and accepted congratulations from guests who assured her she'd handled the situation perfectly. The bridesmaids surrounded her in a protective formation, already crafting the narrative they'd share later. And I stood in the middle of our ballroom, mine and Maria's ballroom, built with money I'd earned and decorated with care she'd given, and felt something fundamental shift inside me. I didn't follow Maria immediately. That might seem cruel, but I needed to see what would happen next. I needed to watch my son choose his position, make his allegiance clear. Jackson was now slow dancing with Christine to a song about eternal love, both of them swaying as if the last 10 minutes had been erased from the timeline. The reception flowed on. Dinner was served, filet mignon and Chilean sea bass, paired wines for each course. Toasts were given. Christine's father, Jeffrey Fuchs, stood and delivered a speech about new beginnings and family blessings that made my jaw clench. He kept glancing at me during the toast, his eyes calculating, his salesman smile never quite reaching his eyes. I excused myself after the main course, citing a business call I couldn't miss. No one questioned it. I was David Moan. I took business calls during family events. It was expected. My study was in the east wing of the house, deliberately separate from the public spaces. I designed it that way 30 years ago when we first broke ground, a place where I could work without interruption, where the noise of family life couldn't penetrate. The walls were lined with law books and business journals. My desk held 3 monitors and a phone system that could connect me to anyone in the world. I closed the door and stood in the silence for a moment, letting my eyes adjust to the dim light. Then I opened my desk drawer and pulled out the manila folder my attorney had delivered yesterday. Inside were documents I'd hoped I wouldn't need. Eviction notices, trust documentation, property records showing that the guest house, the luxury residence Christine and Jackson had already moved their furniture into, was held in an irrevocable trust with me as the sole trustee. Not a gift. Not a transfer. Mine. I'd suspected something was wrong 6 weeks ago when I'd seen a moving van at the guest house. Just getting settled in early, Jackson had said when I'd asked. Christine wants to start decorating. You don't mind, right, Dad? You said we could live there after the wedding. I'd said they could use it. I never said own. Then came the mortgage application I'd found in my own trash can, filled out in Christine's handwriting, listing the guest house address and estimating its value at $2.3 million. Then the property tax records Jeffrey Fuchs had requested from the county office, caught by my accountant who flagged anything related to our estate. Then the overheard phone conversation between Christine and her mother about finally having a real asset to leverage. They thought the house was theirs. They've been planning on it. I was reviewing the eviction notice one more time, checking the legal language when I heard voices in the hallway outside my study. The walls were thick, but sound carried through the ventilation system, an architectural flaw I'd never bothered to fix because I'd never needed privacy for my own family. Assured you, the property will be ours by midnight. That was Jeffrey Fuchs' voice, nasal and urgent. The old man gave his word. He's sentimental about family. I moved closer to the vent, staying silent. Your word isn't worth shit to the bank, Jeffrey. Another man's voice, rougher. We need documentation. A deed. Something that shows you have collateral. It's being processed. David Moan is a man of his word. Once the reception ends, we'll have him sign the transfer papers. He's emotional right now, proud of his son. It's the perfect time. And if he doesn't sign, a pause. Then Jeffrey's laugh, sharp and humorless. He will. He's already committed in front of 300 guests. The house is ours. We just need the paperwork to make it official. I heard footsteps moving away, Jeffrey's voice fading as he returned to the reception. Trust me, by midnight this is all settled. The Moan Estate guest house becomes our property. We take out a mortgage, and your money is secured. Everyone wins. I stood in the darkness of my study, the eviction notice in my hands, and felt a cold clarity wash over me. This wasn't about love or family or new beginnings. This was a transaction. My son's wedding was a business deal, and my wife had just been the collateral damage in Christine's power play. I checked my watch. 9:15. The reception would go until midnight. Dancing, cake cutting, bouquet toss. All the traditional moments that made a wedding feel legitimate. I picked up my phone and called my attorney. David, everything okay? I need you to witness something, I said. Can you be at my estate in 20 minutes? Of course. What's this about? I looked at the documents spread across my desk. The trust papers, the eviction notice, the property records proving ownership. Everything I needed to protect what Maria and I had built. I'm stopping a robbery, I said, and I want it documented. I could hear the music from the ballroom, even in my study, the sound of celebration muffled by stone walls and distance. Guests would be dancing now, loosened by wine and the romance of the evening. Christine would be holding court, accepting compliments on her dress, her flowers, her perfect day. Maria would be at home, our real home, the main house, probably changing out of that cream dress, probably wondering what she'd done wrong. I'd check on her after this was finished. I'd apologize for not acting sooner, for letting the guards touch her, for not stepping between her and humiliation the moment it started. But first, I had business to finish. I gathered the documents, placed them in a clean white envelope, and walked back toward the music, toward my son, who'd chosen silence, toward my daughter-in-law, who'd chosen cruelty, toward a reception that was about to become something else entirely. The DJ booth was on the far side of the dance floor, elevated slightly so the music could reach every corner of the ballroom. I caught the DJ's eye and made a cutting gesture across my throat. He nodded, confused but obedient. The music died mid-song. In the sudden silence, 300 guests turned to look at me. I walked to the center of the dance floor, the white envelope in my hand, and waited for Christine and Jackson to stop dancing. "I'd like to make a toast," I said, my voice carrying easily in the quiet, "about family and homes, and what we build when we build with love versus what we build with lies." Christine's smile faltered. Jackson's face went pale. I opened the envelope. Christine's hand went to her throat, an unconscious gesture that betrayed her awareness that something had shifted. Jackson stood frozen beside her, his champagne glass tilted at an angle that would have spilled if there'd been anything left in it. Around the dance floor, guests exchanged glances, uncertain whether this was part of the planned entertainment or something else entirely. Jeffrey Fuchs was near the bar, and I watched his salesman's smile flicker as he calculated what I might be about to say. He took a step forward, then stopped, as if an invisible line had been drawn that he suddenly understood he shouldn't cross. I held up the envelope so everyone could see it. Clean, white, official, the kind of envelope that held documents, not greeting cards. "I've been thinking a lot tonight about what it means to build a home," I began, my voice measured and calm. "Not just the physical structure, the walls and the roof and the foundation, but the intangible parts, the trust, the respect, the understanding that some things are earned, not given." The ballroom was so quiet I could hear the fountain in the garden outside, the gentle splash of water that Maria had insisted we install because she liked the sound of it on summer evenings. My wife and I built this estate from nothing. 30 years ago, this was empty land and a dream. We worked for it. Every stone, every window, every rosebush in that garden represents hours of our lives that we'll never get back. But we didn't mind because we were building something for our family, for our son, for the generations that would come after. Jackson's jaw tightened. He knew where this was going, or thought he did. He glanced at Christine, who was staring at me with an expression I couldn't quite read, part defiance, part calculation, part fear. When my son told me he was getting married, I was happy. Not just because he'd found someone, but because I thought he'd found a partner. Someone who would value what we value. Someone who understood that family means protecting each other, standing up for each other, even when it's uncomfortable. I paused, letting the words settle, especially when it's uncomfortable. I could see Maria now, standing at the edge of the ballroom near the French doors. She must have come back, drawn by the silence. She'd changed out of the cream dress into something darker, more subdued. Her eyes met mine across the space, and I saw the question there. "What are you doing?" But tonight I watched my wife, the woman who planted every flower you admired during your ceremony, who spent weeks making sure every detail of this reception was perfect. I watched her be publicly humiliated and physically removed from her own home for wearing the wrong color dress. I let the absurdity of it hang in the air. Not the wrong dress. The exact dress the bride approved. Just the wrong color interpretation of that dress. Christine's face was flushing now, red creeping up her neck. David, this isn't the time. When is the time? I cut her off, my voice still calm but harder now. After you've moved all your furniture into property you don't own? After your father has taken out a mortgage on a house that isn't his? After you've convinced my son that his mother is an embarrassment to be discarded? The crowd's murmurs started then, low and shocked. Phones came out again, but this time they weren't capturing bride drama. They were documenting something else entirely. Jeffrey Fuchs moved forward now, his hands raised in a placating gesture. David, let's talk about this privately. This is neither the time nor place. You're right. The time was 6 weeks ago when I found the mortgage application. The place was my office when I could have confronted you before you moved your daughter's belongings into my guest house. I turned my attention back to Christine and Jackson, but I want to be sure. I wanted to give you both the chance to prove me wrong, to show me that this marriage was about love, not assets, that my son would stand up for his mother when she needed him. Jackson finally found his voice. Dad, you're making a scene. I'm making a scene? The words came out sharper than I intended. Your wife had your mother removed by security at her own family's estate for wearing a dress she was told to wear. And you said nothing. You stood there with your champagne and told her not to make it worse, as if she was the problem. Jackson's face went white. Around us, I could see guests pulling back, creating more space, as if the confrontation might become physical. Some are already edging toward exits. So let me make something very clear, I continued, holding up the envelope again. This guest house you've been settling into, the one you've been treating as your wedding gift, the one your father has been promising to creditors as collateral, it's not yours. It never was. I pulled out the first document, holding it up so the closest guest could see the official letterhead. This property is held in an irrevocable trust established 15 years ago. I'm the sole trustee. The beneficiaries are myself and my wife, Maria Moan. No one else. Christine's hand went to Jackson's arm, gripping it. You said it was a gift. You said. I said you could use it, Jackson stammered, looking at me now with something like panic. I thought. You told me we could live there. I told you that you could stay there while you got on your feet. While you found your own place, while you built your own life. I pulled out the second document. This is an eviction notice. You have 30 days to remove all belongings from the guest house and return the keys. Any property left after that period will be disposed of according to state law. The silence was absolute now. Even the catering staff had stopped moving, frozen mid-service with trays of cake slices no one would eat. Jeffrey Fuchs' face had gone from ruddy to gray. He pushed through the crowd, his voice desperate now. You can't do this. We had an agreement. You gave your word in front of witnesses. I gave my word that my son could stay in the guest house. I never mentioned ownership. I never discussed transfer of title. And I certainly never agreed to let you use my property as collateral for your failed business ventures. I pulled out another document. This is a credit report for Jeffrey Fuchs, obtained legally through my business attorney as part of a routine background check. It shows 3 bankruptcies, 2 failed businesses, and current debts exceeding $700,000. Jeffrey lunged forward, but 2 of the security guards, the same ones who'd removed Maria, stepped between us. They were still on my payroll, after all, still taking orders from the man who signed their checks. You had no right, Jeffrey sputtered. I had every right to protect my assets from fraud. I turned back to Christine, who looked like she might faint. Her perfect makeup couldn't hide the pallor that had overtaken her face. Did you really think I wouldn't notice the furniture moving in? The mail being redirected? Your mother's calls to interior designers billing my account without authorization. That was a misunderstanding, Christine tried, but her voice had lost its earlier confidence. We were just trying to save you the trouble. The trouble of owning my own property? I handed the envelope to Jackson. He took it automatically, like a child being given homework by a teacher. Everything's in there. The trust documents, the eviction notice, the property records. I suggest you read them carefully and comply with the terms. Because if you don't, the next envelope won't be from me. It'll be from my attorneys, and it'll contain a lawsuit for fraud, theft, and whatever else they can make stick. Jackson stared at the envelope as if it might bite him. Dad, please. We can talk about this. We can work something out. We could have worked something out before you let your mother be dragged out of her own home. Before you chose your wife's cruelty over your mother's dignity. Before you decided that property was more important than family. I took a step back, suddenly tired. The adrenaline that had carried me through the speech was fading, leaving only exhaustion. But you made your choice, son. Now you get to live with it. Christine's voice came out as a whisper, but in the silence it carried. Where are we supposed to go? That's not my problem. You're adults. You have jobs. Jackson has his law degree. Figure it out the way everyone else does, by working for it. I looked around at the 300 guests, many of whom were now filming openly. This reception is over. The bar is closed. The music is done. I like everyone to leave my property. The crowd started moving immediately. That particular kind of exodus that happens when people realize they're witnessing something that's crossed from entertainment into genuine family destruction. They'd talk about this for years, I knew. The Moan wedding where the father evicted his son. The reception that ended with legal documents instead of a bouquet toss. I didn't care. I walked past Christine, who was crying now. Real tears, not the performative kind she'd weaponized earlier. Past Jackson, who was staring at the envelope like it held a terminal diagnosis. Past Jeffrey Fuchs, who was already on his phone, probably calling lawyers who would tell him there was nothing to be done. Maria was waiting by the French doors, her face streaked with tears but her spine straight. When I reached her, she took my hand. We're leaving, I said quietly. She nodded. Payback. For both of us. Of course she had. Maria always knew when to retreat and when to stand ground. She'd known tonight would end one way or another, and she'd prepared. We walked through our garden, past the roses she'd planted, past the fountain I'd installed for her, past the oak trees that had stood here longer than our marriage, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Relief, maybe, or just the clean emptiness that comes after you've cut away something infected. The main house was quiet. Maria had indeed packed bags. Efficient, practical bags with 3 days' worth of clothes and toiletries. She'd also packed the photo albums from our early years, before Jackson had grown into the kind of man who valued property over people. Where are we going? She asked as I loaded the bags into my car. Anywhere but here. We drove through the estate gates at 10:30, 45 minutes before midnight. In my rearview mirror, I could see the lights of the reception still burning, guests streaming to their cars, the chaos we were leaving behind. My phone started ringing immediately. Jackson's name flashed on the screen. Then Christine's number. Then Jeffrey Fuchs. Then my attorney, probably hearing about what happened from someone who'd been there. Then my business partner. Then numbers I didn't recognize, probably journalists already hunting for quotes about the wedding that had imploded. I turned the phone off. Maria reached over and took my hand, the same way she'd done 38 years ago when we'd driven away from our own wedding reception. Her hand was older now, marked with age spots and the thin skin that comes with time, but her grip was just as steady. Did you mean it? She asked quietly. About cutting him off? I thought about Jackson standing there in his expensive tuxedo, his face blank as his mother was removed. I thought about the years I'd worked to give him opportunities, the trust fund I'd established, the connections I'd made on his behalf. I thought about how easily he'd thrown all of that away for a woman who saw us as assets to be liquidated. Yes, I said. I meant it. He's still your son, and you're still my wife. You stood by me when I had nothing. When we were living in a one-bedroom apartment and eating ramen to save money for our first business venture. You believed in me before anyone else did. I glanced at her, seeing her profile in the darkness. If I have to choose between the man who forgot where he came from and the woman who helped me get here, that's not even a choice. She was quiet for a moment, watching the road unroll before us. Then, Where are we really going? I smiled. Remember that cabin we stayed in on our 10th anniversary? The one in the mountains where it rained for 3 days and we didn't care because we had books and a fireplace. You bought it 5 years ago. I've been maintaining it, just in case we ever needed to disappear for a while. She laughed, and it was the first genuine laugh I'd heard from her all night. You've been planning an escape route for 5 years. I've been preparing for the possibility that our son might turn out to be someone we didn't raise. I merged onto the highway, heading north toward mountains and distance. I hoped I'd never need it, but tonight, when I watched him stand there and do nothing while you were humiliated, I was grateful I had somewhere to take you that was just ours. Behind us, the estate lights faded into the distance. Ahead, the highway stretched into darkness, punctuated by streetlights and the occasional rest stop. My phone, still turned off in the cup holder, was probably filling with voicemails and texts. Apologies, maybe, or demands, or lawyers' letters. It didn't matter. In the morning, I'd call my attorney and make sure the eviction notice was properly served. I'd have my accountant freeze the trust fund I'd established for Jackson, the one he'd been drawing from since graduation. I'd notify my business partners that my son was no longer to be considered part of any deals or discussions. I'd do all the things necessary to protect what Maria and I had built from people who saw it as something to be taken rather than earned. But tonight I just drove. Maria fell asleep somewhere around midnight, her head resting against the window, her hand still loosely holding mine. I drove through the darkness with my wife beside me and felt something I hadn't felt in the ballroom surrounded by 300 guests. Peace. By the time we reached the cabin, dawn was breaking over the mountains. The air was thin and cold, nothing like the manicured warmth of our estate. There was no fountain, no orchestra, no crystal chandeliers. Just a small wooden structure with a fireplace and a view of peaks that had stood long before we were born and would stand long after we were gone. I carried our bags inside while Maria started the coffee. The cabin smelled like cedar and old fires, like memory and refuge. Through the window, I could see the sun hitting the mountains, turning them gold and orange and impossible. My phone, turned back on to check for true emergencies, showed 87 missed calls and countless messages. I scrolled through the preview texts, Jackson begging to talk, Christine demanding we reconsider, Jeffrey Fuchs threatening legal action, my attorney asking for guidance, friend asking if we were okay, and one text from Maria's sister, saw the video. About damn time someone stood up for her. Where are you? I typed back, somewhere safe. We'll explain later. Maria came up behind me, 2 mugs of coffee in her hands. She looked at my phone screen, at the cascade of messages, and raised an eyebrow. Want to read them? I turned the phone off again and took the coffee. Not particularly. Do you? She smiled, that private smile I'd seen that morning when she was getting ready, the one that said she was trying to convince herself of something. Except this time, it wasn't uncertain. It was peaceful. No, she said. I really don't. We sat on the porch as the sun rose higher, drinking coffee in silence, watching the world wake up around us. Somewhere south of here, a wedding reception was probably still being cleaned up. Security would be packing equipment. Caterers would be loading leftover food. The estate would be empty again, waiting for us to return. But not yet. For now, there was just this. 2 people who'd built something real, sitting in a cabin they'd earned, watching the morning light hit mountains that didn't care about weddings or evictions or family drama. Mountains that just stood, solid and unmoved, the way Maria had stood when security grabbed her arms. The way I'd stood when I handed over that envelope. Do you think he'll understand? Maria asked quietly. Eventually, I thought about my son, about the choices that had led him to this moment. About the weakness that made him choose silence over courage. About whether people could change, really change, or if some patterns were set too deep to break. Maybe, I said, if he wants to. If he's willing to admit he was wrong. If he can find his way back to the person we raised instead of the person he became. I set down my coffee and took her hand. But that's his journey, not ours. We did our part. We raised him with values and opportunities. What he does with them now is his choice. She nodded, understanding what I wasn't quite saying. That some distances can't be crossed, that some bridges burn beyond repair, that sometimes love means letting go of the person you thought you raised and accepting the person they chose to become. I don't regret it, I said. The eviction, choosing you over him. I squeeze her hand. I'd do it again. Every time, in every version of tonight. You deserve someone to stand up for you when you couldn't stand up for yourself. I'm just sorry it took me so long to do it. Maria leaned her head on my shoulder, and we sat like that as the sun climbed higher and the mountain air cleared away the last residue of champagne and crystal and a reception that had cost $500,000 but was worth nothing at all. Later, we'd go back. We'd reclaim our estate, our home, our life. We'd deal with lawyers and consequences and the social fallout of what I'd done. We'd face the reality that our son might never forgive us, that the grandchildren we'd hoped for might never know us, that family dinners would forever have an empty chair. But for now, there was just coffee and sunrise and the quiet dignity of two people who'd remembered what mattered before it was too late. And that was enough. Thanks for watching.